In our last video, we commenced the creation of our first temporary job. You'll recall that it was for Kinder Health, Hamish King, Hunting Age Care Worksite, and we determined who for this job will be supervising the job, approving the approving the timesheets, recruiter responsible for it, and who will be receiving the invoices. And we put a short description that will appear on the invoice when we generate it. So now we're going to say what positions do we want to fill in this job, and when do we want those positions to be scheduled to work. So when I go add position, I get a list of positions, and the only positions that I can select from are those that are relevant for the award that we have allocated to this particular account. So you'll recall we had that this account would be under the nursing award, therefore enrolled nurses are a position within that award, and therefore that becomes available for selection. So then we're saying we are adding a requirement for a enrolled nurse at Hunting Age Care Worksite. And you can see I can add other positions now. So maybe I want to add a different kind of nurse or an anaesthetist or any other kind of role. I can have many roles beneath the single job header. But we're going to keep this video simple, so we're just going to have the single position. Now that we've got our position that we are allocating to this temporary job, we now need to say when do we want this. But before so, we say what kind of requirements must the candidate or the contractors meet to meet this job. So here we're saying that in this case, again just keeping it simple, that we're providing an enrolled nurse for Kinder Health in the Hunter worksite. It's a casual enrolled nurse. We want 2 of them, and they must have a certificate 1 in health support as a minimum. Now we're gonna dive into detail about these other functions in later videos, but just by way of an introduction, you know, we can even say that they have to live in a certain suburb, because then we can start to match the right contractors who are closest to that work when selecting them. Licenses, degree types, even PPE. There is no limitation to what we can define here. You can also save it as a template so that the next time you're adding a job, you can select from template. And then that would copy all of the details that we might have defined here. So, you know, I can save this as a template and I can call this enrolled nurses. So the next time I add a job for enrolled nurses, I just select from template. I'll be able to select enrolled nurses, and I will then get, I will save that requirement. So just repeating, we now are saying that we want an enrolled nurse for Kinder Health in the Hunter worksite. That enrolled nurse, we want 2 of them, and they must have a certificate 2 in health support to be eligible to be allocated to the job. We then select schedule, and we're now about to define the actual schedule when we want this. We want these enrolled nurses to be employed. So we can give it a name, and it may be just weekly. It may be just called a standard weekly shift, standard PM shift. And then I give it a name, so you know, PM. I quite like to put the start time and end time in the name, because then when you're viewing it in the roster, it's somewhat a little bit easier. But that's a personal preference. And then we say, well, when do we want them? So I can do a range for that much if I want to. But in this case, we just want them for a week from the 14th to the 20th. And then I say, well, when do I want them? So on the Monday, we want them from 1500 to 2300. Now don't worry about the fact that they might not work what we actually think we're scheduling them for. That's a different story. But this is when we expect to provide the staff to meet the requirements of this job. And then you can do this sort of thing, you know. So here in this week, it's a Monday to Sunday. We don't need anybody on the Thursday, and we don't need anybody on the Sunday. Again, when we get into later videos on temporary jobs, this can all be modified and extended and changed, but we're just keeping it reasonably simple for the moment. And then we can actually save this as a template as well. So standard PM shift, but we might articulate this a little bit more. Monday to Wednesday and Friday to Saturday. Save that as a template, so next time I come to add a job that is on the standard PM shift with this template, I don't need to redefine this because I will select from a template. So we can save that now. So then we have into the properties of the job. We're going to now talk about the properties in the next video, but let's just recap what we've got here. So we've created our job header, Kinder Health. We've determined who's going to be the managing contact, supervising, approving timesheets, receiving invoices, and the work site that these contractors will be provided to, and the order numbers from an effective date. We've also created the invoice description. We then created our position, and you can see I can add another position to this job, which may be for a different date range and different time range. So imagine you had enrolled nurses here working 15 to 2300, but then you also had to provide 4 nurses working on the morning shift. You could add another position down here. Here we then specified the requirement. What this means is these are the skills, qualifications, licenses, competencies, PPE. These are attributes of the candidate that must be met for them to be scheduled to the job. So later, when we actually start allocating candidates, we are only going to be able to allocate a candidate who has the Certificate 1 in health support as a minimum. So once we decided here what we required, or what the candidate must meet, the requirements the candidate must meet, we then determined the schedule. And the schedule here is a standard PM shift, Monday to Wednesday, Friday to Saturday, shift name, date range, and we specified when we want the workers to work. Now I can now repeat this schedule, and I could repeat this schedule for 52 weeks, and or 2 months or 3 weeks. So just to show you that, we'll repeat this schedule for 2 weeks. You can put an end date. So the idea here is that I can put an end date way into the future, but it will end either on this date or when the 2-week repeat. So it's a bit like when you want to do a repeat for 52 weeks but end on the 31st of the 12th. Well, then you don't need to be too specific about how many weeks when you're determining that, because you can stop the job requirement at a specific date. So what you're able to do when you do that, you can actually view in your calendar. I didn't show you that before, but you can view the calendar so you can see what it looks like. So we can see here in March 14th, this is the schedule that this person's going to be working. So it's just, I don't know how often you'll do that, but it's a good opportunity just to check that the schedule that is manifesting itself from this definition is rightly represented in the schedule that we want to allocate our candidates to. Okay, so in the next video, we're then going to talk about the properties. And the properties are important because they're going to control things like rates. It's going to how we fill the shift. And this is where we come back to the settings that we've defined on the customer, because our award interpretation is going to be based on that. And we'll cover that in our next video. Thank you very much.